All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all for being here. Want to respect everybody's time and definitely want to get through this presentation. I know there's a lot of stuff to hack into, and for that we appreciate Coach spending some time with us today. So many of you have been on prior with myself and Chris and Dan. So kind of the same guidelines, just keep ourselves on mute and post any questions that you might have throughout or looking for clarification through the chat. I know Coach has taken those questions that you asked prior, had the opportunity to ask and put those into the presentation as best as he can. So that'll be exciting, a little bit different than we had done in the past. And again, just going to go ahead and get started and be respectful of Coach and put myself on mute, and here we go.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Excited that you're all here. I even put on like sweatpants that don't have any holes in them today, so kind of a big day. But it's cool to talk about isometrics. You know, who knew that it would be such a hot topic as of late? Exercise where you're not really moving. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to ask you guys, and you don't have to. I won't be able to see here because I'll be jumping to the actual presentation. But I got a handy dandy timer here. It's set on 5 minutes. So if you want to, you could stand up and just stand at attention for 5 minutes. So I'll get the timer rolling, but try to have great posture as you do that. Alpha person posture, stand up, and we'll just see how that feels for a good 5 minutes. So I'll get that going and I'll jump right into the presentation here. There we go. This timer is started. Go ahead. Tyler, you got to let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So before I get going, just want to thank Tyler for putting this together, doing a lot of behind the scenes work. Really appreciate it. And then my journey in terms of isometrics started probably, I think we can all agree we probably did some sort of isometric growing up in like youth sports. I can remember like torturous leg lifts back in the day in youth football. But in terms of the actual training piece, these are the guys who really got me down the rabbit hole that I'm in. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but one thing that I do know is when a lot of really smart people like these guys start talking about common topics, in this case isometrics, it's definitely worthwhile to do an extended dive down into them. And that's what I did. About 2 years ago, the density, I guess you could say, of my time spent with isometrics increased quite a bit. And that was through a random encounter with a guy who had some questions about sprint training. And if you read my One Man's Dive into Extreme Isometric article, he is referred to as Kirk. So he has been my mentor in Extreme Isometrics over the past 2 years and has provided a great amount of guidance for me. He worked directly with Jay Schroeder for a few years. And so the information you're getting from me is essentially like twice removed from Jay. So these are, again, the guys that have definitely have led me down that rabbit hole of isometrics. And I'm certainly very thankful because it has been pretty life-changing for me individually and has brought a lot to our program, I think. As we go through here, the big message that I would encourage you is to make sure you go on your own journey. Don't take my word for anything. Make sure you try to experience it for yourself. I think we can all agree that if we can bring personal experience to coaching, it's certainly, we're able to coach things better. When we started working with Extreme Isometrics in our program, probably about four-ish years ago, I think, we had good cues. We had good, instruction for the athletes, I thought, but our coaching staff in general didn't really have the experience of it. And I'd say like we had an outcome of a 5 from what we were doing. And if you ask me in general, like if something's an outcome of a 5, it would be worth not doing. So for me, and I know our head coach as well, I think getting the experience of actually doing these types of exercises really enhance the value. And now I would say that what we get out of it is closer to like a 9 or a 10. Which is worthwhile keeping in the program. My journey in general, I'm a big advocate of sprinting at max velocity, and I used to view sprinting, max velocity kind of as the base, and then you could build repeat sprintability on that base, and the stronger your base you have, the higher that repeat sprintability can go. And I don't think that's wrong, but I think the shift that I've had now is that max velocity is the roof, and the higher that roof goes, the repeat sprintability is the house that's underneath, so it can grow taller. And ISOs kind of provide the foundation and the mortar that holds everything together. And I think you'll be able to see that as we go through the presentation today, what exactly I mean by that. We got about a minute left on that standing at attention. Okay. One challenge, or one thing that this has done for me, is made me let go of my analytical side. I'm a math teacher, so I like data. I like hard evidence, but I think it is important with this to just get a feel for it. So this is a quote that Kurt gave me the other day. There are things that can be measured. I can't see that part. You guys can see it though. So things that isometrics can measure or can be measured. I don't know if it'll ever get researched, but there's a synergy that comes from the things you can't measure, and that synergy has to be experienced. There is no way around that. So again, just getting the actual feel of going through this is going to require you to kind of let go of that idea that you need data for everything. And that, again, I think is just a huge, big important message here. So that was 5 minutes. And I'd just like to, have you think about how that actually felt, the thoughts going through your head. Were you able to maintain position? I know when I did, I've done the stand at attention quite a few times, and the urge to move is always super challenging. I find it interesting where I fatigue in certain places. So I think just doing something simple like that, standing at attention, can bring some value, and just kind of be a good intro even for athletes, just to for them to see, how difficult it is to just stand and only breathe and blink, basically. One reason why I think the isometrics were different for me, and I've done a lot of different types of training over the course of my athletic career, but it really brings together what Jay Schroeder refers to as the pipes: physiology, intellect, psychology, emotion, and spirit. For me, not all exercise addresses these 5 issues. And I think the unique thing about isometrics is you're able to address these 5 items every session, where, certain types of modalities you can't do every day. And I think with isometrics you can. So you're really able to dive into something that is really all encompassing on a day-to-day basis. This is a big thing with Jay still to this day. And I think it is something that separates it from other types of exercise. So why isometrics? I'll be honest, I kind of got sick as a track coach of finishing up practice and then going to the weight room. We had 2 years ago, I think, it was an April where I swear it rained. It was cold, windy, and rainy like every day. So we had to spend some time in the weight room there, and that was fine. But then May rolled around in that season, and it was like super sunny out, and like the last thing we wanted to do as coaches and as our athletes was go to the weight room after a session on the track. So we started brainstorming with ways that we could bring the weight room, the qualities that we would get in the weight room, out to the track, and isometrics were a good fit for that. So that was one big reason, was just bringing the weight room out to us. Another one, a commonality that these 4 guys talk about, to kind of simplify it, is a bigger muscle is a dumber muscle. So in our season, our competitive season, because we don't do much in the off season, we're not really able to. We want to make sure that the response that we're getting in terms of tissue, the coordination comes along for the ride. We don't want to build too much tissue, and we felt isometrics kind of are able to do that pretty well for us overall. Another benefit of isometrics, research shows that if you increase the strength in an extreme range. So a muscle fully stretched, if you increase that strength while you're at an extreme length, then you are able to, the strength throughout the entire range of motion increases. So that's definitely a pretty good benefit in regards to ISOs. If you are in a non-extreme position, it's said that it goes 15 degrees in each direction. And then one thing I also mentioned was the low metabolic cost with isometrics. So, you're able to perform them more often. This quote from Dan Fichter really, it hit me like a freight train, I'll be honest. I think this was way back at Track Football Consortium 1. I don't even think it was called TFC back then. But this quote was something that really, really struck me and kind of reformed and probably made me go down that rabbit hole of ISOs even more. It can be difficult to maintain a maximal velocity longer than 2 to 3 runs of a very short distance. That means anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds of proper neurological programming per session. And that simply isn't enough. And that's where ISOs come in. So what I think another aspect of ISOs that people often overlook it is, at least in this format, it is a high velocity exercise. So when you're in an isometric position, obviously it doesn't look like any movement is happening, but if you looked under your skin, okay, muscles would be contracting and relaxing like crazy. I believe it's said to be approximately 15 hertz. So that's faster than you can contract and relax voluntarily. So muscles are doing their thing. They're kind of going crazy. So it is a high velocity of exercise. And the cool thing about it is it's extremely safe. Okay. We haven't had anyone pull a muscle or anything like that while performing an isometric. So a big question was, and I would ask you guys, is if you can increase the volume of high quality, high velocity exercise, knowing that there wasn't a cost, like, would that be worth implementing in your programming? Another thing you can do to kind of showcase this or to feel this is the idea that moving really fast and really, 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 really slow are similar challenges to the nervous system. So one thing that I've done, I'm a golfer, but you can do it with any type of movement, is just go through a golf swing really slow. Like when I say really slow, like 3 to 5 minutes just in your backswing, 3 to 5 minutes coming back down. And you'll see the challenges that your nervous system is faced with. You'll feel some shaking and things of that nature. That coordination required to move really, really slow is doing similar things if you were going to go through and do it really, really fast. Daniel Coyle talks about moving really, really slow in the book, The Talent Code. And he gets into the myelination process of that. But that's something that, I'll be honest, has changed my golf game quite a bit. It has definitely improved my ability. And I think you can do that with, again, just about any motion. And again, it's really, really safe. When we look at isometrics, another item, a really good podcast to listen to was on the Just Fly podcast with Dr. Keith Barr, but he explains this concept really well. This is about the extent of my artwork right here. And that concept is creep. So I think there's two things, tendon health versus tendon performance. I know in our training, I would say, we did a really good job of tendon performance, doing, plyometrics and sprinting and things of that nature to improve tendon performance. But, maybe we were overlooking tendon health a little bit. And what happens when you're going into an isometric, if these two black dots are the joint, okay, when you're contracting the muscle, okay, it's going to gradually shorten and shorten and shorten, and the tendon essentially lengthens a little bit. All right, obviously it goes back, but basically, this lengthening of the tendon in the muscle tendon unit is something that's healthy. So I think isometrics from a durability standpoint that's another perk for that. And again, I would check that podcast out. Dr. Barr probably does a much better job explaining creep than I could. When we look at positions, this is something else that I think is pretty cool. This is me in an isometric extreme iso lunge. All right, and when we look at that, Okay, so I'm just getting a question here from Tyler. The extreme positions we'll get to. So yeah. Anyway, when we look at this right here, these two spots right here, toe off and MVP, maximal vertical projection. For me, I see a lot of similarities to where I'm at in the lunge there. It's not ideal, okay, or not identical, but it's pretty close, okay. You have that split, that cross crawl patterning there with the lunge and where we're at with sprinting. So I know that, this is a kilogram that's stolen from Altus. All right. So hopefully they're not going to get pissed about me utilizing it. But anyway, most of our, like for high school coaches, this is an elite sprinter. Most of our guys don't look like that, right? But my thing would be is if I can utilize the lunge to get the body to be comfortable getting to a position like this, that's going to be a win. Okay. So that's one thing, is just to get the body feeling safe in that position up here. So once they have the ability, or if they can develop the ability to put enough force into the ground to get here, they'll feel comfortable with that. Franz Bosch talks about that quite a bit in his second book, where the body kind of doesn't care about the middle of a motion. It just wants a target. So if this is our ultimate target, to be able to get here, I can utilize the lunge to help me get there. Okay. So in sprinting in general, I think it is super important to, like, I would just look at it from, this is my endpoint. This is where I want to get to. I can use the lunge for that. And then everything else on touchdown, full support, and toe off, when you're interacting with the ground, that would be the other part of sprinting that I think is really important. And for those of you that looked at we're part of the second Zoom with Dan and Chris. Chris went through his foot and ankle stuff, and that stuff is absolutely gold. And I would highly encourage you to invest in that second session if you haven't. I had the fortune of seeing that firsthand with our guys this year, and the amount of improvement that they had just even within a single session was pretty incredible. With that foot and ankle stuff, there is a lot of yielding and overcoming isometrics that are utilized along with additional exercises. So if you haven't checked that out, I would, again, highly encourage that. So when we're talking about iso extremes, really what they are extreme slows. Okay, it's all an extreme slow, which is just a yielding iso with a little bit of a twist. So if I'm right here in this would be considered to be my extreme position. If I'm going to do that hold for a certain amount of time, I'm going to gradually fatigue. And maybe I only lower, like, after the first minute, I gradually lower maybe an inch or 2 inches or something like that. So over that course of, let's just say it was a 3-minute hold, all right, I'm moving maybe 2-3 inches. So that's a pretty short distance over the course of time. And it's considered to be an extreme slow because it's movement that's really, really slow over that time period. Now, if I go, in the next slide, you'll see me when I pull into position. You could do an extreme slow when you are at a higher range of motion and pull down slowly, or like do the golf swing, that kind of thing. So it's all an extreme slow. It's just a matter of what is the range of the extreme slow. Could it be 2 inches? Could it be a foot? It just depends on what you're going after. Another thing I will say is I use the word holds a lot. Technically, that isn't correct. We're in this type of isometric, we're always active with what we're doing. So you're not really holding or bracing. Bracing is the enemy. You want to have muscles actively engaged. I just say holds because it's easier than saying extreme slows or iso extremes or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. There's always active work going on. So this is an example of me pulling into position. So you could actually do an extreme slow from this range and just try to pull down into the lunge position as slow as you can. That's a good teaching thing that you could utilize if you want. If you have athletes that have the ability to kind of maintain focus and go really, really, really slow. But here I'm not going really slow. I'm just pulling into position. So I'll play it a couple times here. So that's just pulling into position. Now, what does that mean in terms of pulling into position? It's pretty simple. I'm utilizing this hamstring to pull myself down. Okay, so what that entails is trying to move this front foot backwards. All right, so I'm actively trying to move this foot backwards to get this hamstring to engage and help pull myself down into position. So anytime you hear me say pull into position, that's what we mean. And once you get into position, you continue to pull. All right, you're continually using this hamstring to pull down. All right, it doesn't stop for however long you're going. You want to have max intent on that. All right.
Is there a benefit to being barefoot? That's been a question.
Yes. It's harder, and then I think you're going to utilize your foot better. One thing I noticed going through the duration that I was able to hold for with shoes on versus barefoot was probably about a 30-second difference. So it is more challenging when you're barefoot, but with shoes is fine too. So I think it just helps strengthen your feet, and you're going to be able to utilize some sensory information in the bottom of your feet much better if they're exposed to the surface you're on. So the big question I always get is like the maximum duration, holding a position for a long time. Like, I guess the question is like, you're going to try to pull into position with maximum intent for 5 minutes. Like, is that realistic? And I'll be perfectly honest, when I go through and I do, an extreme iso lunge and try to go as long as I can, am I able to maintain like maximum intensity the entire time? And the answer is no. Me personally, no. I don't know. There might be some freaks out there that can do it, but I can't. Okay. There should always be intent trying to pull yourself into position. And I can be pretty locked in for about a minute and a half. And that fluctuates. I mean, it could go higher, it could go lower, depending on the session. It depends where my mind is during the session, in terms of that. But I really like the challenge of trying to maintain that intention of a maximum contraction as long as I can. All right. And one thing that I do notice is, for me, right around, maybe depending on the day, like 45 seconds to a minute 15, I can still be locked in and have max intent, but I will feel the contraction strength shift. So I just won't be able to contract as hard. I'm trying to contract as hard as I can, but it definitely, the intensity of that contraction goes down. So one question was asked, like, do I utilize different tension intensities during the course of training? And I kind of think that when you go for maximum duration, it's going to hit a wide range of tension intensities. So like, I'll start out at maximal, but at times my mind will drift. I'll get off task and I'm like, oh, damn, I need to go, contract harder. So I'm going to kind of get a wide range within that maximum duration session. Okay. Some energy system info. I think, a lot of people are probably track type people. And when you're looking at a 400-meter dash, this comparison kind of tied up some loose ends for me. It's generally accepted. You're going to go out, you're going to utilize an ATP PC, it'll get into glycolytic, and then you're going to get to lactic acid. And what will cause the decrease in velocity in the 400-meter dash is just that the lack of coordination. All right, your lack of ability, your inability of your muscles to continue to contract and relax efficiently. So this is what we'll generally see with the 400-meter dash. All right, that makes sense. Okay, this is my hypothesis with what's going down in extreme isos. We start off, same deal, like that during that strong contraction, I'm in ATP PC glycolytic. And then when that contraction shift happens, my hypothesis is I'm going aerobic. Okay. Now there's some debate here, like if you're able to kind of cycle energy systems and go back and forth between these two. Some of Jay's guys would say, like, you have this idea that while you are primarily aerobic for a while, this ATP PC is recovering. I don't know for sure. But this idea of cycling energy systems, I will say this: at some point, you're going to come out of this, and you get to the point where it's just really, really hard to hold on, and things are burning, and you're shaking, and that to me is you're shifting into lactic acid. So, in general, we know with like energy systems, all three are kind of doing some work uh, all at the same time. But again, this is just kind of like the progression that I would see that happens in an extreme iso lunge. Okay. Um, so you're kind of getting more of a full cycling of the energy system in general. You're going to be addressing some aerobic, maybe a little bit more than you would over the course of a 400-meter dash, for example. And overall, the reason why you're going to get this progression, I think, is that the coordination demand is lower. In the 400-meter dash, you're not going to switch into a case where it's primarily aerobic, because your body can't to handle the task that it's being asked of. You're not getting enough power from that system. So that's just my hypothesis on that. I also think there have been times like when I was in this lactic acid phase where I was shaking, and this is when I would get to like a 4-minute hold, where I could get to a point where I could just all of a sudden like contract harder and be able to hold longer. Now, does that mean I was going back to ATP PC? I don't know. Again, this is me having to like looking for a solution to satisfy my analytical side by what I was feeling. But I wonder, and you can dive down in energy systems all you want here, but like, was I able to utilize lactate to go back into the Cori cycle? And you can go down in that rabbit hole, but the bottom line is that's just what I felt like I was able to, even though things were burning and I didn't think I could hold on any longer, I was able to contract harder. And that's one thing that Kurt said was like, when it gets really, really hard and you think you're gonna, you can't hold on any longer, just try to contract harder. And I was able to do that. So take that for what it's worth. The maximum duration, or trying to when you lunge to the point of failure, I think there's 3 big components to it. One, it's obviously a stimulus. All right, so your body's going to respond to that stimulus. I think it does a great job of teaching your body how to recover. And another quote from Dan here is, if you don't stress the body maximally, it'll never learn how to recover maximally. So I think lunging again does a great job with that. You are stressing the body an extreme amount, and you're giving it an opportunity to recover. In certain cases, if you do it twice a day, you're going to get that situation where the body has to recover to be able to handle the next session. So you're teaching your body how to recover better. And then I also think it's meditative. All right. You're looking at this like, in the face of fire, can you get to be parasympathetic? And the best way that I was able to overcome that was just focus on breathing. So I think there's some great results to be had there. Getting yourself into a high pressure situation and just being able to breathe, get through it, focus on what matters. I think that there's something there that is really powerful for athletes. And you're just that ability to continue to be parasympathetic throughout something that is just an uncomfortable situation is valuable. So overall, maximum duration versus maximum intensity. All right. I think there is value in both. The biological or biochemical benefit of duration, I often say it's like the body sensing that there's a 5-alarm fire, and then it's going to produce chemicals and things of that nature to put out that fire. But then it gets to the fire and it's just like a campfire, and it puts it out. But all those chemicals are produced, and you're going to get that benefit of it. And again, there's just not that much metabolic cost, and that's why you can do it so often. So I think that's something that when you're looking at max duration or getting to the point of failure, that's definitely a benefit. The max intensity, where maybe you're only doing like 30-second holds, all right, where you're able to maintain that really, really strong contraction. There you're going to build a really good signal strength, and I think there's value with that. Overall, maybe a mixture might be the best option. So like if you're doing one where it's just max intensity, maybe you're doing 30-second holds and you rest like 30 seconds between reps, you might not get to that point of failure during the session with that. But maybe if you do 30-second holds, but your rest between is just, maybe one belly breath, eventually there you might get to that point of failure. So you might be able to kick in some of that biochemical benefit as well. I think Boost Jacksonator constantly talks about lactate being a signaling agent for anabolism. So I think that may be why, a mixture could be your best option. And ultimately, what you utilize is your choice. One of Jay's clients that it would be hard to, talk about iso extremes and not talk about Adam Archuleta, but like some of the stories with him were like he was doing 4,000 drop jumps, drops just from a 48-inch box in the course of a day. Like one, I don't really know how that's possible. It's like over 3 a minute for a long time. But he was apparently able to do that. And the idea here, like the long duration isos were really designed to be able to handle drops at a high volume. So you got to make a choice. Like, are you trying to build an Adam Archuleta? Well, I don't know if we really have the time to do that in the window that we have to train athletes. Okay. But, are there things that you can take away to still enhance the athlete's ability to recover and handle high intensity training? So with all that being said, this is going to be the teaching progression component of what we'll look at. All right, so this is my basement, and I'm rocking through here, just going into a lunge setup from the front. Okay, so feet shoulder width apart. You're going to take a small step forwards. Small step forward, big step back. We're looking for this front shin to be perpendicular to the ground. Okay, and then I pull into position. You want the knees to stay in line with the hips. All right, so pretty straightforward. The big thing with these exercises is getting into proper position. All right, and we'll look at some common errors, but this is the big thing, that I see a lot of times with items that are posted on extreme iso lunges. And, I'll be honest, like our athletes aren't perfect at them either. But these are like, if you get the positions right and you get them to where they're locked in, that's where you're going to get the most benefit. If they don't have the positions going well, it's going to be a challenge. So that is from the front. Here's a common error, the non-perpendicular shin. Okay, so there I'm good. See a lot of athletes do that where they rotate inward. Okay, so the knee coming in there, that's a common error you'll see. Not so much with the knee going out, but again, that would be not good. So look for that non-perpendicular shin. Base width issues, this is a definitely one that you'll see quite a bit. So we set up, and you can see the feet are in line. It's not where we want to be. Okay, that is a really, really common one. So one thing you can do to avoid that is when they are going to step back, you can have this right foot, my right foot, I could have that on a line and then step straight back onto the line. And that will kind of keep that issue from occurring. The other one would obviously be if the foot is out too wide. Okay, and again, you can see here, that would not be ideal. Okay, so step straight back. All right, the setup from the side, this is relatively decent position. Okay, front shin, you're looking to be perpendicular to the ground, front thigh parallel, so you should have a 90-degree angle there. You can see I'm a little bit off. The front foot, the weight should be on the forefoot. Okay. So Kirk would tell me you want to be able to fit a piece of paper, but not cardboard underneath your heel. Dan talked a lot about this in Dan and Chris's first session where they were talking about ISOs, how that heel can maintain contact to the ground, but you should be able to slide it side to side. Okay. I've played around with it too, where I've had the heel higher. So, you kind of get a feel for that, but I would encourage starting, with just that weight on the forefoot and then moving from there. That'll get the calf to get engaged a little bit better. Okay. You want the rear leg extended as far as you can, so as close to straight as possible. This back foot ideally would be perpendicular to the ground. You can see I do have some mobility issues on my right foot, so I'm not able to quite get there. All right, and then posture-wise, you want alpha person posture, and a good way to showcase that is just the ears being over the shoulders. So I would encourage you to have your athletes get comfortable coaching one another with this as well. Okay, that way they can kind of point out errors to one another, because even with this, for me going through this session and videoing myself working through these different positions, I could see some compensations that I was making. So it is helpful to get feedback. All right, the rear, you just want to pay attention to this, the foot position. So if we look at this, this is pretty good. All right, we want to be over the ball of the first met. A common one you'll see here is not being on the ball of the first met. So again, right here, this would not be ideal because we want to get over that ball of first met. That's going to help the glute, that rear glute, to get engaged a little bit better, and you'll be able to feel that the difference. This was something I noticed right away. I was more likely to be in this position when I first started, and then when I kind of played around with the positioning a little bit and I got to the ball that first met, I could feel my glute contract, which is going to be something that we are going to want to have happen. So that's a really important one. And again, a very, very, very common one that we'll see. This is something that's kind of crazy, but when you see athletes who are on that outer part of the foot here, that same thing happens in gait. All right. So it's, again, a good way to rehearse what should happen in gait and get them comfortable with getting to that ball the first met. So cues, when we're in position here, we're trying to pull backwards. All right. So I'm trying to bring this heel back, all right, to contract that front hamstring. And I'm trying to do that as hard as I can. Okay. The rear leg, I am pushing this foot backwards. Okay, so pushing it this way to try to drive this leg forward. Okay, but I'm obviously not moving that leg at all. Okay, but I'm trying to push my rear leg back to get this rear leg to come forward. All right, there's 3 cues that you can utilize. First, just push off of the ball that first met on the back foot. That's one way that you can get the rear leg to be that glute engaged. The second thing, if they're unable to do that, is to just tell them to contract their rear glute. Okay, they may get that feel that way. And then the other thing, and this is really important, if you don't, you'll be able to see the difference in this video, but you want to, like with this rear hip flexor, just kind of get them to try to pull this thigh forward a little bit. And you'll see that's what I'm doing here to kind of showcase this. All right, you'll see a difference here. There, I'm trying to pull the thigh forward a little bit, and that's what we want. Okay, I don't do it as well that second time. All right, but we want this pelvis, that left side of the pelvis, to kind of almost be tucked in like a posterior tilted position. All right, that's going to get the rear glute and the hip flexors on the other side to kind of go back and forth in terms of contraction. It's really kind of creating just a co-contraction between those two. But having that posterior tilt of the pelvis is extremely important. I know Chris talks about it in all his foot drills that we do. Having that posterior tilt to the pelvis is something that all great accelerators do. So this is another great opportunity to practice ideal running mechanics, getting your body comfortable with that position. One cue that's really, really helpful for me is like you're trying to close a pair of scissors. So I'm trying to bring this leg back and this leg forward. And that's one thing that helped me be able to maintain a maximum contraction better. And then only blinking and breathing, which is an extreme challenge, as we probably saw with just doing something standard like standing at attention, right? So this would be the teaching progression that I would encourage if you're going to go through with yourself or with your athletes. So we'll roll through that. The first one is the knee lunge with the band. So you can see the rear foot, the rear leg is, I'm on my knee. I have a band around my ankle. You could have someone holding this, obviously. You could use a towel, you could use a rope, whatever. You could have another person on the end of this band. So if you don't have that many bands, you can have two people doing this at the same time. But what this band will do is get the hamstring to fire a little bit better. Okay. That's really the most important thing, is to get this hamstring to do work. Okay. When you're in this position, having the rear knee down just lessens the load a little bit. So you're just really able to focus in on that front hamstring. So pretty simple. I'm just, again, trying to bring my front heel backwards. So that's it. Okay, first part of the progression. I think a good place to start, if you've never done this before, is try to be able to hold, if you can do this and hold it for a good 3 to 5 minutes, without stopping, and just making sure that front, where you're really just focusing in on that front hamstring. I think that would be, again, a really, really good place to start, and you'll probably start feeling better pretty quickly. So then the next part of the progression would be to add the contraction of the rear glute. Okay, so I'm pulling with that front leg again. And there you can see my glute. I'm kind of toggling it between being contracted and not contracted, so we can see there, but we just want to get that rear glute contracted. Okay. It's surprising like how challenging that can be coordination wise, to get your body to try to pull this backwards and contract the glute. So, you can take your time with that until you get a good feel for it. Here to challenge that front leg a little bit more, you could still have the band on the leg here. I don't. All right, but we're just going to elevate on that. You could put this in the progression if you have the capabilities of doing it facility wise. Probably not essential, but it will put a higher demand on that front leg before you work into the coordination of the utilizing the back leg. Okay, so this one, I'm just going to pull down into position. Okay, and then there you can see I'm toggling, working again that idea of bringing that rear leg forward a little bit to get a posterior tilt in my pelvis. All right, roll through that one more time. Again, you could have the band on there if you want. Standard lunge with band. So now we're putting this foot on the ground. I photoshopped this because I got kind of tired of doing videos. So this is just a lunge, the end position with the lunge with the band. Okay, again, that band will help get that hamstring to fire, which is the most important part of it. And then the iso extreme lunge. So that would be the teaching progression that I would encourage. In terms of timing, like how to go about that, it's kind of up to you. Again, if we go back to the knee lunge with the band, a good place to start again is to be able to hold 3 to 5 minutes just doing that. And then you can kind of progressively do the same thing. You could toggle in the full lunge position if you like, but again, the big thing is going to be able to contract that front hamstring and again, push with that rear foot to get that glute to contract, the rear glute. Okay. But I think that's a pretty safe way to introduce the lunge and make sure that the proper items are firing as you're doing it. A stair variation, the Kirk special. We were talking about this earlier this week. You can utilize stairs. So this is something that I've tinkered around with. This will decrease the load a little bit for you, and you're still going to be able to contract that hamstring pretty strongly in this position. You can see you get really nice length on that rear leg. It also looks like the toe off position on that altus kinegram. So this could really be an exercise within itself. And one thing that's cool is you can vary this rear foot position. You can alter the knee angle, the angle that your foot's making with the ground, and work on a wide variety of those, the Corpus wall drills, which is another benefit of this. Okay, but again, this is just another really good way to be able to feel that front hamstring working and get the rear glute and rear hip flexor kind of working in tandem there. This one, the extreme fast, this is one that I kind of made up and I found helpful for our athletes. So if we just watch it one time here, at the top of a lunge, and I'm just lowering down really fast. This is a little bit different. Like in Jay's progression, he talks a lot about drops. A drop would be if I was in this position and I'm contracting everything really, really strongly, and then I let go and fall and then catch myself. That would be a drop. Here, this is a little bit different because I'm keeping this hamstring relaxed. And then when I go to sink down, I try to move this foot backwards to get the hamstring to fire. So this is just a tool to use with athletes who aren't really feeling that front hamstring engaged. I found that if I asked them to do this really slowly, pulling down, they lost focus. Who'd have thunk high school boys would lose focus. So this extreme fast was a way to get them to feel that moving down. So I'm just, again, trying to move that front leg back as I go down, and you can feel that hamstring engage pretty strongly. Okay, so a little bit different, little twist on a standard drop. Kinesthetic cues, I think, are definitely important. Having the hand on the front hamstring, definitely worthwhile. You can feel the strength and contraction there. So just putting that there as you're doing the exercise can definitely be helpful. Same with the rear glute. It might look weird that you have 50 or so athletes grabbing their own butts, but whatever. As long as they're feeling what's supposed to be firing, in my eyes, life is good. Another progression that is definitely worthwhile to get you to pull into position with your hamstring is a wall squat. All right, so here you can see I'm standing on a wall. Feet are about 12 inches from the wall, 8 to 12 inches apart. And I'm just, again, utilizing my hamstrings to pull down into position. So I'm trying to bring my feet to the wall. All right. So it's not just a standard wall squat where I'm bracing. I'm actively trying to utilize my hamstrings to get the hamstring to do the work on the way down. Okay. You can do this also. One thing that's pretty challenging, but certainly worthwhile, with a single leg. That'll definitely get you to feel it. So that'll be then more similar to the load that you're feeling in the lunge. You can do that with a single leg and go down really, really, really slow. Okay. Toggling that exercise with the lunge is pretty crazy and pretty helpful. So that would be something I would encourage you, and we can even work that into the progression, toggling that back and forth with any of those teaching progressions within the lunge, doing that with a single leg. Okay, so that was the progression for the lunge. And one of my thought processes here was like, okay, that's great. I really like the lunge. It addresses one of those key positions in sprinting. But what about the hamstring at length? So here's some research here that shows muscle activity. And as we look at this, just to keep it simple here, you can see that when the hamstrings are firing, the glute is also active. Over here, same deal, okay? So one exercise that trains the hamstring at length in conjunction with the glute is the iso extreme standing glute ham. I personally love this exercise. Took away back pain for me. But it is pretty complicated. It doesn't look that complicated. It looks like you're kind of just touching your toes, but the coordination demand is pretty significant. All right, so as we look at this, feet shoulder width apart, you can move your heels in 15-ish degrees. And the key thing there, you want to drive your hips backwards to initiate the position. And you're going to, as you're in this, you're pulling into position. You're trying to get your face to your groin. You'll be able to see this a little bit better from this side view. Okay. So I bring my heels in, arms tucked, chin tucked. I initiate that movement again with bringing my hips back. Okay. So chin down, tuck to chest, hips back first. And pulling into position with like my abs, trying to bring my face to my groin, driving my hips backwards, and then driving my heels either down or backwards. Same with the hips, either up and back. Whatever cue works where you can feel this, but essentially you should feel both your hamstrings and your glutes firing. This really took a long time for me to be able to feel both of those. But the difference for me, I had some pinched nerve in my back that made a huge difference in just my quality of life, to be honest. And I think it's a great exercise that trains, we have 50 some sprinters on our team. We have one glute ham machine in our weight room. It would be hard to get everyone through that. This is just a workaround for this. In Jay's program, there are two main exercises that utilize a glute ham machine. But for us, this is just a nice workaround. And our athletes really like this one. It's probably, to be honest, because they're not pulling hard enough, because when you're doing this correctly and really trying to get your face to the groin, it's not a comfortable position to be in. One thing in addition, once I get in position, that I'll often do is lift my toes. And that kind of provides a little bit of an oscillatory isometric there, because you won't be as balanced. You won't have your toes out there to kind of be the brakes and movement. So you'll get a little bit of extra movement in there that serves as an OI. When you first start doing this one, I would encourage you doing it near a wall or a bed. That way you can really, really drive the hips back and not have any fear of falling backwards. But that's how hard you should be driving your hips, and your hips either up and back, and your feet either down or back. Again, you might feel it a little bit differently. With one, you might feel a better contraction than the other. So I would experiment with both. Okay.
Are your knees locked out in that position, or slightly flexed?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's some debate. So like I'll refer to Dr. Tommy John's book later on. He has them where the knees are bent. I typically do them where my knees are locked. I haven't noticed any downfall in doing it where my knees are locked. Technically, I guess it would be more extreme on the hamstring there. So I would just encourage you to experiment with both. I personally like it with the knees locked, but to each his own there. I found it to be fine with the knees locked. The reps, this might be even better, because we talk about intention, standing in that or getting into that position and holding it for 3 to 5 minutes. It's especially at first, it's if you're doing it well, it's not easy, and furthermore, it's I think a little bit easier to lose focus, because gravity's not working as hard on you as it would be for the lunge, so it's easy to lose intent. So this might be a better approach for athletes. Like, we'll either break it up into doing standing glute ham for 20 or 30 seconds, where we really tell them, hey, just make sure that you're really pulling down, or that you're getting your face to your groin kind of deal as hard as you can. Or you can do reps with it. So this would be an example of reps. So I'm in position there, and now I'm going to pull hard for however many seconds. Here I'm just doing a couple. You can go 5, 10, whatever. but I'm just pulling violently as hard as I can, really driving the hips back with that. So that could be, another great option. All right, so that's the glute ham. We'll move on to the hang. So we're looking at 4 primary ones today. So that we're getting there. We got the hang and then the push up. So I think I got 5 variations for the hang now. The scap or the dead hang, not really an extreme isometric. There's no pulling into position with this one really. You're just literally putting your hands on the bar and hanging. It was like 40 out when I was doing this, so it's kind of cold. But I did the shirt off because it's just going to be easier to see some of these other variations here. A couple keys with the hanging: try to make sure your head's in line with your spine. The parallel grip would be preferred. So this is in my garage. This is my pull-up bar. It would be preferred if my palms were in. So I have the nice part of this setup for me is I'm pretty tall. My feet don't touch the ground. In my basement where I was, I have monkey bars. I do have to bend my knees, but I do have the parallel grip there. So it kind of then determines, what I hope to get out of the hang. Like, do I want to just be able to hang fully, or am I looking for the parallel grip? That's the choice I have. I'll probably get some sort of setup where I can have a parallel grip in my garage at some point. If you have pain, you can widen your grip. And then the cue here is just to let gravity win. This is a pretty uncomfortable position to breathe in general, but it's amazing, like just the things that you'll feel loosen up as you hang it, for a long time, as long as you can. This is something I try to do 3 to 5 minutes at least every day. It also, I think, has increased my grip strength substantially to where, like, my dad was an electrician. He's a retired electrician and just had ginormous forearms. I think I'm finally at the point where I could overpower him, like in a handshake, because of the dead hang. It could be because he's getting older too. I don't know, but it definitely it has also screwed up my short game in the golf world too. Because my touch is just all kinds of messed up probably because of this exercise. The iso extreme scap. So this would be where there is a pull into position. All right, so you're going to get in that scap hang position. And then the motion is just a couple inches, just bringing your scapulas together. So pull your shoulder blades down and together, okay? And you're pulling maximally in that position. You should find your chest goes up. I've also heard the cue, like actually try to take your hands and press them up into the bar. I feel like my shoulders fire pretty good during the course of this exercise anyway, so it's kind of not necessary, but it could be something to experiment with, like pressing your hands up into the bar. Okay. So that would be the iso extreme scap or iso extreme pull-up. I've gotten away from saying pull-up because people think of going through a full range of motion and pull-up. So this just makes it a little bit simpler for clarification purposes. Extreme scap side view, just so we can see this real quick. You can see how the chest comes forward when you do that, head in line with the spine. So pretty straightforward there. But you want that kind of like hollowing out of the chest where it comes forward. All right, so I've talked a little bit about drops where you're getting everything really, really tense. You let go and then you catch it. This is an example of the drop with a pull-up. All of Jay's exercises, you can utilize this. This will be the example I show. So I'm up in position, I'm gonna let go, and then I'm just trying to catch myself at the bottom. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one there. Okay, so scap drop, sorry, here we go. So I'm gonna get up into that iso extreme scap position. I drop down and just try to catch it at the bottom. Okay. This one was a challenge for me because I pretty much just do scap rebounds. So you can see how I'm kind of bouncing back up a little bit. Ideally I wouldn't want that to happen, doing a scap drop, but it kind of also shows that I'm, and I think Dan alluded to this on the DB hammer progression. Like you can see if you're ready for a rebound, if you kind of pop up naturally. Okay. but you get in that position, let go of the tension, and then just catch with maximum tension and then return to the start and repeat. The rebound is going to be the same thing, except when you get to the bottom of the position, you're going to try to return to position as fast as you can. Let go, come back up. With these, the drops and the rebounds, if you're going to progress to that, I would be patient. They're pretty demanding, and I would, like, for example, for our guys, obviously we had a shortened season. I think we're in season for 9 weeks. We did not progress out of the dead hang or the scap iso hold. Okay, so we were just doing those two. We didn't progress into drops or rebounds with our athletes. You definitely want to have a lot of time accumulated just hanging to prepare the body to be able to handle those moves. All right, the last movement, iso extreme push-up. You can see here I have something to place my hands on. You know, it's not completely necessary. You could do them on the ground, but you will be able to get to a more extreme position with your hands raised. You could also have your feet elevated here to make it more challenging, but you're going to start in the top of the push-up position, and as is common, you're going to go ahead and pull yourself into position. So here you're going to be utilizing your back muscles, your pulling muscles to lower down into position. And you're going to continue to keep trying to pull yourself lower and lower, getting that stretch in your chest to continually increase. You want your elbows at 45 degrees. You're moving your shoulder blades down and back. A cue that Dan gave in their presentation was trying to lift your hands off whatever surface they're on. I think that's a phenomenal cue, and you'll really feel a great stretch there in your chest. Going on your knees is acceptable. So if you want to do 5 minutes of a hold and you can get to 1.5 minutes, you know, then just let the knees fall and then try to finish with the knees on the ground. It's the same with the lunge too. Like if you want to do 5 minutes of work on each leg and you can hold for 1:30 and then you struggle from that point forward, put the knee on the ground and go as long as you can. And then if you fail there, take a belly breath and then get back into it. All right. So, you know, you can definitely lessen the load if you're trying to break through a plateau or something like that. The push up from the side, key thing here to see is just when I end up in position, my elbows are over my hands and straight line head to toe. So you want your core or trunk, whatever you want to call it, to be engaged. So you should feel your glutes being, you know, glutes are tight. You know, you should be pushing, you know, your feet down into the ground and just holding that position. Another item that can be utilized with the push-up is utilizing a door frame or a rack or something that nature. So you can see here, I'm just going to pull into position from a doorway. When you get into position here, you should have your heels off the ground. You should be pushing it down into the ground and trying to, again, use your back muscles to pull your upper body through the doorway. So back muscles to pull the upper body through, and then pushing with your toes to get that upper body through the doorway or the rack. Watch that one more time. I should truthfully have my heels off the ground as high as I can here. You can't see it here, but you really want to try to push as hard as you can into the ground with the feet. There's that one from the side. Again, I should have higher heels. And straight line head to toe. See my heels come up here. I should be pushing a little bit harder. Okay. There's a variation here. There's actually a series of videos that are out with Jay Schroeder and his wife, where she's doing it with her arms straight out to the sides. So I wouldn't, maybe that is actually the exercise. This is just a variation that I came up with because I can't stick my arm out all the way in my basement here. So but I do feel what I need to feel with this variation. But you could have your arms straight out where your like forearms would be resting on the door frame or the rack. So that's the teaching progressions of the exercises. A lot of the questions that you guys had were dealing with programming concerns, so I'll try to address those best I can. Like any type of programming, you're going to be looking at volume, intensity, and density. All right. With the intensity piece here, I would say, it's assuming that we're rocking with maximum intent. Okay, so again, the fluctuation of the intensity that can happen in an isometric for duration can vary, but we want to try to make sure that that intent is maximal, as much as possible. All right, but the key thing here, like volume, we'll get into talking about like how often and things like that. But a big question that you have to answer is just the density piece. So like, what is, how much work do you want to do with each exercise? And then what's the window to reach that level? So are you just going to try to knock out 5 minutes as fast as you can? Or are you going to implement it throughout the course of the day? All right. Where you're just trying to accumulate work. So maybe your goal for one day is to have 10 minutes of total lunging or 5 minutes of hanging throughout the course of the day. And you break that up however you like. So the density of it is something that definitely needs to be considered. And it's probably of those three variables, the one that there can be the most variation of, depending on what you want to get out. So ways that we have done or utilize ISOs. On acceleration or max velocity days, we'll incorporate short holds with max intent and intensity. So a simple one would be 6 by 30 seconds on each leg. You'll do all on one leg and then the other. That way you're going to get a little bit of lactate accumulated to signal some anabolism there. You can go, 4 belly breaths between reps. You could go 2, kind of up to you, some flexibility for sure. But you want, again, you're trying to drive, a really strong contraction there. If you want to crowd it even more and just do 1 belly breath, you could. So it's just kind of, there's some flexibility there. And you can insert these during the course of a workout. You run a sprint, lunge 30 seconds on each leg, rest, come back to it, do that for however many sprints you're doing, or it could be done as a finisher. So again, there's quite a bit of flexibility. Try to figure out what works for you. Lactate type days would tend to utilize longer holds, just kind of, makes sense with what the training objective is. So there, an example could be like 3 by 60 seconds on each leg, one leg then the other. Here I would crowd the rest a little bit between it. And again, it could be done during the course of a workout or as a finisher. I've done both. We'll a lot of times with jumpers, I'll have like a particular circuit that they will go through on our lactate type days. And then, we'll have lunging as part of that circuit. And then, maybe we'll have a finisher, we'll finish with like an additional like hold till failure or something like that. Again, it just kind of depends on the day. All right. But there's definitely some flexibility within that. All right. Recovery days, pick your poison. All right. So with the recovery days, a lot of times like on a Wednesday in years past had been our recovery day, and, we might have like a team meeting and, just send guys home. And I think there's value in that. We'll still do that here and there. But we've utilized the isometrics now as a way for our athletes to recover. I heard Dr. Tommy John talk about when he was in Chicago. He would train a lot of the Bears, and they would go through some hell doing some extreme isos like day after the game. And but those guys would all feel pretty great after doing the isos. So I think they can definitely be utilized to just enhance the body's ability to recover. As we talked about before, the extreme isos are stimulus, the recovery, and they're meditative. So I think they can really be used anytime. All right. just like the Shakira song. Okay, whenever, wherever. This is a picture of one of our sprinters from last year. His name's Josh Bridges. Josh, his freshman year had some hamstring issues. Sophomore year, no issues. Junior year had some, and then his senior year, everything was going well. He went out to New Balance Indoor Nationals, tweaked his hamstring again. We were scheduled 2 weeks later to go out to California, to San Diego, and run in the meet. And we didn't know if Josh was going to be able to compete. At the time, I was reading Dr. Tommy John's book, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, we're going to be in San Diego. Can we, bring this athlete by and have you take a look?" And he said, "Sure." So we went out to San Diego. We brought Josh there, and Tommy spent probably 3 hours with Josh, and he put him through hell. I mean, honestly, our meet was the following day, and I didn't know if Josh was going to be able to move for a week, with what Tommy put him through. It was pretty crazy. And we went out and we practiced afterwards. Josh felt okay. And then the next day, Josh woke up. He said, "I'm ready to go." He went out, anchored our 4x1 to victory, and ran a really, really good 100. So we didn't even know if he was going to be able to compete going into this. After that workout, which again was pretty grueling. I mean, it was like 2+ hours worth of work, which a lot of it was isometrics. Josh was able to compete the next day and perform at a high level, which again, I think is support of that idea that there is a low cost with the low metabolic cost. And, you're not going to get the delayed onset muscle soreness that you would through kind of standard exercises. But with the isometrics, Josh was able to perform the next day. So that was a big eye opener for me. And that's why, we felt we could go ahead and incorporate the isometrics into our recovery days to kind of teach the body to recover a little bit more effectively. Some options for duration. These are things that we use with our guys. Set a timer for 3 to 5 minutes. You try to hold it as long as you can. If you fail down always, just so you don't hurt yourself trying to get back up. 2 belly breaths and then get back into it. So that's one simple option. The timers, I showed you mine. I have like 12 of these. So guys can use their iPhone, although I prefer them not to have their phones. I practice just for focus sake, but whatever it takes, that's one option. If they have their own individual timer, then they just kind of go. If they fail at 2:37, they stop. Again, reset it, get reset, and then start the timer back up. Here, this bottom one, 15 by 20 second reps each leg. So again, you'd be in position for 20 seconds. You fail down, so you intentionally fail down, stand back up, 1 to 2 belly breaths, and then get back into it. So you'll feel, going through that 15 by 20 second reps, you'll feel a pretty good amount of acidity building up within that. So those are a few different duration options that can be used. For athletes that I would describe as twitchy, kind of highly developed nervous systems, I classify them, I box them into 2 different areas. Either they're really elastic, they can recycle energy. A way to tell that, Chris and Dan went through the rebound jump test. Okay. Sorry. So the elastic athletes, the rebound jump test, if you have their vertical jump, what you can do, if you know what that is have a box at that height, have them do a rebound off of that. So just step off. And then if they jump from the ground and they can go higher than the box, that's a really good indication that they're pretty elastic. All right. The force athletes who thrive on tension, but to fatigue really fast, either of these, I think you have to handle with care. The elastic guys will probably be able to hold for a longer time. All right. The force guys won't be able to be in there, it won't be able to hold as long. So, figure out what works for them. All right, with this, and just know your athletes. That's a super important thing. One of our guys last year was our state triple jump champion. He, was not a huge fan of the holds. All right. So, I found a way around that by using a speed rush and lunge. So he still did holds, but I was able to supplement a different exercise to kind of get something similar out of him. So just know your athletes and, again, figure out what works for them. Do you have to get to 3 or 5 minutes worth of holding? It varies on the demands of your sport. Okay. That would be my idea. I think 3 to 5 minutes is a good indicator. It certainly builds up some work capacity. And, in truth, with track and field, I don't necessarily need to have an insane amount of work capacity for a 100, 200 kid. But if I was coaching football, I would definitely want my guys to have a high degree of work capacity. So you just have to kind of figure out what works for your scenario. Question came up: are skill work and ISOs enough? Well, for me, like as an individual, isometrics have been enough. For me to stay fit. Within my sport, in track and field, I mean, basically that's kind of all we do. That's it. I mean, we do ISOs for strength work. We do skill work. So it's kind of all we do in the track and field, at least in our track and field program. But for others, maybe not. A sport like football, are there other lifts that would be beneficial for athletes? Sure. And one thing that is sort of catching fire a little bit more now is the Barry Ross type system, where you're doing like a hex bar deadlift, really heavy loads, followed by a dynamic exercise. I would think it would be, I've kind of done this a little bit myself, where I'll do a hex deadlift. I don't load it up that much. I do more higher rep kind of stuff, followed by a dynamic exercise, followed by 30-second lunge on each leg. The advantage of doing the lunge afterwards, there is you're going to reset your nervous system, get back into that cross crawl patterning that the brain likes a lot. I know Dan Fichter talks a ton about that, where he'll do strength tests where you do a bilateral movement, you lose strength in a certain test, and then you go back to like marching, and then you retest the same strength, the strength again, and it's there. So the body really, really likes a cross crawl patterning, and an iso lunge is a great way to get that back. So that would be something that I would consider, if I was going to do some standard bilateral type lifts, integrate a 30-second lunge on each leg between those, whether it's that Barry Ross style or, any other type. Some speed power concerns, like if you do all the, if you do the long duration holds, has there been any like degradation in speed and power? I haven't noticed it for me as an individual, and I didn't notice it for our athletes. What was cool for us is with the isometrics, since it's a pretty consistent stimulus, I was able to pick spots throughout this. Like they never performed poorly. I shouldn't say that, but like our guys were able to perform at a high level consistently, but there were spots where I wanted to make sure that they were like really, really ready to go. And I could just kind of get rid of the ISOs, leading into that a little bit. And they performed really well. Last year, it was essentially like 3 meets, where a few days before, depending on the importance of the meet, we would just pull the ISOs a little bit. And then pulling that stimulus out, they felt even a little bit better, a little more springy, and they were ready to roll. But again, I don't want to make it sound like it was like the traditional like peak type phase, because they were still throughout the course of the year able to perform at a really high level. So again, the big thing there is just to kind of know your athletes and know what's going to take for them to be successful. For us in track and field, I treat meets as a sacred thing. We don't really train through them too much. Weekday meets in our outdoor season, maybe a little bit, but like we always want to put our guys in a position where they're able to compete at a high level. So I did not see isometrics as something that inhibited them to be able to perform at a high level. As I said before, Jay's system, and Dan alluded to this too, is really based on drops, absorbing force through a drop. Okay. And one connection that I've made is when you're in that, like for an isometric lunge, you're using your hamstring to pull yourself into position, but your quad is still doing work. Okay. So when you are working through there, you're basically creating a co-contraction, and the co-contraction would have both the agonist and antagonist contracting at the same time. And the reason why you would want that is because they're going to be present in drops. All right, your body's going to turn on both of those muscles to protect itself. So a simple way to do that is if you put your arm straight out in front of you and have like a pen or something, and you grip it really loosely, if you just squeeze it really fast, okay, you're going to feel basically every muscle in your arm and even down into your back contracting, okay, to stabilize. All right, so the iso extremes are really a tool to prepare an athlete for drops and then rebounds at a high volume. All right, again, we talked about Archuleta and the 4,000 drops off a 48-inch box in a single session. Okay. The thing is, and I just want to make sure I emphasize this, progressing into drops and rebounds, I would be very, very patient. You want to milk every bit of stimulus you can before you progress to the next one. I think, and I'm guilty of it too, with high school athletes. Like you know that there's something that they could do to kind of put them over the hump, so to speak. But in an ideal world, you want to try to be as patient as possible, and delay stimulus, because once you put them through that stimulus, they're going to be desensitized to it. So you just got to be careful. All right. Muscle slack. It's another thing that Franz Bosch talks a lot about. Here's my, again, wonderful artwork. So the black dots represent the muscle tendon unit, or I'm sorry, the joints, and then the purple line's the muscle tendon unit. So the big thing here is if you're just at rest, okay, there's going to be slack in the muscle. All right, but force can't be produced until that muscle slack is taken up. Okay. What I really like about the isos is there's no external load. Okay, so it's teaching the body to create that tension on its own. All right, and Chris Korfis talks a lot about this, how a squat, like if you have a barbell on your back, you place that barbell on your back, it's going to take up the slack. Just your body stabilizing to hold that bar is going to take up the slack. So it may not correlate well or as well with the vertical jump, because with the vertical jump, you don't have that bar on the back to take up the slack. So there may not be that direct transfer there. So again, the isos may be a little bit better option, just in terms of that. Again, I'm not saying that, don't squat your athletes or do loaded exercise or anything like that. It's just something to consider. All right. Another item is like, can you load up these style of isos? Yes, you can, but you really, really need to make sure that you're in a good position. Something I noticed as I progressed into loading them up, putting like just holding a barbell underneath me, was I would get at times, like afterwards, little like some pain in my back. And it was just probably because I wasn't in a good position. So it's going to put a little bit of different demand on the system. So again, you just got to make sure that you or your athletes are in a really, really good position where everything's firing the way it should be before you progress to loading those things up. Some other progressions, a great resource to utilize is Dr. Chami John, his book. It'll show some of the exercises, but the other sections in the book are probably just as valuable. I think this is something that every human should probably read and follow a lot of the things that are in that. He also has a podcast where he talks about the isos in particular. Social media outlets, he shows himself and his clients doing the exercises, and he has a huge library of the different drops, rebounds, holds, etc. That you can do. So definitely a good resource. I have a lot of them linked in that second article I wrote. There's a link that goes through and has like just a table of a bunch of different exercises that are hyperlinked to him doing the exercises. As far as troubleshooting is concerned, athlete buy-in, you're going to have to work on your ability to sell. You'll have to know why you're asking athletes to do them. And I would encourage you, especially if you have like a small group setting, to do it with them. All right. Share your experience with them would be huge. I think that's been pretty helpful for me. If I'm going to ask my athletes, hey, we're going to try to hold this for duration as long as possible, but I'm going to do it with you. That's a powerful thing. So that would be, one thing. Understand why you're asking them to do it. Be able to give them reasons, justification, why it would be helpful, and roll through and do it with them. Things to like break over a hump or get better at them. I would just say exposure. Again, I said you can do them whenever, wherever. So give them those opportunities. At times I'll have them do it for homework. If we have a meet on a Saturday, I'll give them a little ISO circuit to do on Sunday. Give them opportunities. Those kids that there's certain kids that you have that'll do whatever you ask them to do. Some won't, and that's fine. But for the ones that will, give them those opportunities. In the course of a hold, breathing is huge. Really focusing in on your breath. I've found to be helpful if you start off a hold with good breathing pattern, good tempo. That is definitely something that can enhance your ability to go longer. I also like incorporating visualization techniques, whatever that may be. One thing that for me that was helpful, getting from like the 4-minute barrier to the 5-minute barrier, was just visualizing myself like kind of out of body, just watching myself doing the lunge. I know that sounds weird, but when I was able to kind of detach myself, that was helpful. Okay. So again, make adjustments as needed with this. Know your athletes. Like if they're getting burnt out on holds, switch things up. Figure out, if they don't like going for duration. Okay, hey guys, we're going to go for 20 seconds today. And do that a series of times. Like vary things up so you can prolong, what they're doing. And that goes for yourself too. Like sometimes I get tired of going for duration. So I vary things up to make sure that I stay consistent. It was a question on extreme isos and DB hammer. So for those of you that saw the second presentation with Chris and Dan, Corfus does rear foot elevated split squat where he tries to get athletes to hold as much as they can for 30 seconds. That's in the middle of that AN1, AN2 bracket. So that's why he utilizes that. For me, I would say, and I think that's a phenomenal exercise. And all his fast guys are able to do that, hold a lot of weight there. I think what happens, this is just, again, my hypothesis with the extreme iso lunge, when you're going through it and you're doing it unloaded, I think those brackets get shifted back a little bit more. So maybe AN1, instead of being 0 to 9 seconds, is like 0 to 1 minute. Okay, I'm just ballparking that. And then the AN2 bracket is like 20 seconds till who knows. All right, it just kind of depends for an athlete. You can kind of gauge it on, when they start shaking and, having issues holding. So that's just, again, kind of where my head is on that one. As far as distance is concerned, there was a question on that. I would strongly encourage for anyone to listen to the Ben Greenfield podcast with Jay Schroeder. If you just Google that, it'll come up. But Jay talks about an ultra marathoner that he trained that only ran once a week at goal pace, and the rest was just done with isos. Pretty powerful, and I know most runners would not be a fan of that program because most distance runners really like to run long distances. So how I could possibly program a distance with this is just cut the volume time spent running in half and then replace it with iso. So this is just an example of maybe a sample program. I used to coach cross country. This would be something I would certainly consider. And this would be for more of a developed athlete. I mean, for someone who's has a low training age, I think I could really break it down into just doing easy runs, sprints, and isos. I think that would be a pretty good base for like a freshman distance runner, and this may be something that they progress into during their junior and senior year. So that would be my general thought with distance. But again, like I said, with them, you can kind of do them almost every day. So in terms of moving forward, it's my guy, Mr. Miyagi. My big thing for you guys, what I would encourage you to do, you're obviously in a unique time period. I would just say, either you take this information and you run with it, you try it yourself, or don't do anything with it. I think the danger kind of lies in the middle. All right. And that's just in terms of your personal use. So I'd say give it a go. You'll be able to get a whole lot more out of it, just in terms of answering questions down the road. You'll be able to kind of answer your own questions, and then you can make a decision in terms of how you want to progress with your athletes and yourself moving down the road. So I think, though, the more that you take on yourself, the better off you may be. Okay. Because you'll kind of be out of that middle area. All right. So I think Tyler his video kind of went out. So I'm going to go and look at the questions here. And then if there's any other questions, let me get off the screen sharing mode here. Kind of come back. All right. So I'll go through questions. And then if you guys have any others, I'm happy to answer them. So okay. I think going through mistakes, toes pulled up or down in the lunge, and that front leg, I just have them down. So front knee over toe, front foot elevated. I know Chris Corfist likes to get that the knee over, far further forward. I got to talk to him about it. I think it's more of an ankle rocker deal for him. And then I also think you're going to get like the soleus at a more extreme range. So that's one of the items that Corfist will do with that rear foot elevated is he'll get the shin and the torso parallel. So that's something that you can certainly do. I was just viewing this more from the from how Jay would do it. I know Chris doesn't agree necessarily with everything Jay did, being at 90 degrees and whatever. And but I think putting that knee further forward can certainly be an option. Kids who lack ankle mobility, I think this could be mobility of really anything. Like if I tell my wife to do an extreme iso lunge, like she can't get to 90 degrees on that front leg. And I don't think that's necessarily a mobility issue for her. It's more of a strength issue. So I think that's one thing that you can run into. And I would just encourage them, like if they have a particular limiting factor, just giving them supplemental work to work through that, and then hopefully that'll just improve in whatever exercise you're asking to do. Okay. Both feet elevated and applied drops. I have done them with myself. Another one that we'll do with our athletes are just like calf jumps. So they're jumping up and down and then land in the lunge position. Um, so, uh, so yes, our athletes currently now are doing some of the exercises that were on that DB Hammer webinar with Dan and Chris, where they're going from a box and then landing in that split position. Okay. Uh, in terms of sessions per week, again, it just depends on how you want to use them. So I think there's flexibility. I will say, like, our guys are doing some form of isometric every day that we train. That's particularly for my jumpers. They're doing that. Okay. I think now we're into the glute ham. So knees locked out. Yeah. Okay. Over there. Okay. We answered that one. Anteriorly tilt the pelvis. Yes. That would be a byproduct of driving those hips backing up. Okay. The large group, is it acceptable to just to hold in a push-up position? I think, honestly, Tommy John breaks it up into 3 items. So like he'll say there's just the resisting of gravity. That's one type of isometric. So just getting in a lunge and trying to not fail. That's one option. Then there's the pulling into position. And the way he uses them is once that contraction shift happens, you cut the set and then you just do you do sets at that length. And then there's the overcoming isometric where you're pushing into an immovable object. So is it acceptable to just do a hold in a push-up position? I think it depends, what you want to get out of it. I would think Jay would say it would be better to be pulling into position the whole time. But again, it kind of depends what you're after. The way Tommy uses them is just to get to that point where eventually you're going for duration, and it's, I think, more of a mental battle than anything. So I think there's value there. So again, I would just encourage you to experiment with it yourself and see what it brings out in you, and then it'll give you a better answer if that's what you want to get out of your athletes. Okay. As far as age progressions, age appropriate, I was actually had a conversation with Jeremy Frisch yesterday, and we were talking about like prepubescent boys, and that isometrics would be great for them. So I think in terms of age, I think there's benefits to be had for youth all the way through, my 96-year-old grandma. Okay. So yeah, I would definitely think there's value there for sure. Okay. We have utilized isometrics for about, I was actually looking back at one of the first warm up I wrote as a coach. So that was 2003, 2004, and I had some isometric elements in it then. So I guess I've really been using isometrics of, my entire coaching career, so 17 years. This type of isometric, specifically, it's been about 4 or 5. And to create buy-in, I think the biggest thing, is to get your top athletes to see the benefits, and then everyone kind of falls into place. So like, for instance, I had a high jumper last year who, is one of those kids who does everything you ask. And he had a great season, and he's fully bought in. So I had a lot of young guys coming back this year. So them just seeing him, take him seriously, kind of did the coaching for myself. So that first year, it can certainly be a challenge. But once you have guys who know the impact that they can have, they do the selling for you. Okay. Yeah, you guys talking about Tommy's spinal hygiene videos. I do have links for the new one, but he hasn't finished doing um, the whole series yet. So I will say, if you follow him on Instagram, he does the exercises and posts them like once a week. Just him doing them in the sun on a beach in San Diego. So yeah, extreme lunge, front hip will eventually go lower than that front knee. That's one way that it'll get more extreme for sure as you do it for duration. Okay. Uh, Anyone else have questions that I didn't get to? Okay. I haven't heard of a test retest after 21 sessions with specific times, but if you want to put that out on the, if you want to send that discussion with to Tyler, he can send it out to everyone. I think that'd be cool to look at. My thoughts on overcoming ISOs, the way that we utilize them in training is primarily with that foot ankle stuff. I've dabbled in them a little bit with, and this is kind of, one of my, something I'm going to explore further. I was hoping to do this year, but obviously, unfortunately, haven't been able to. But some overcoming isometrics in kind of key positions for the jumps, as with what I coach. But I think in terms of like using it for a squat position or bench or anything, or I've read the Bob Hoffman book on it, overcoming ISOs. I haven't used those that type too much with high school kids, but I think there could be value there. We just haven't outside of the foot ankle stuff, haven't explored that too much. We don't really have the setup either in our weight room. I should say that our racks suck for overcoming ISOs. We don't have pins, so that's another challenge that we face with that. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. If you have any questions moving forward, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to answer anything. So good luck. Happy lunging.